Hello, my name is Owen. I'm 20, living in Spokane, Washington, a small city where the streets turn gold with fallen leaves every autumn. I'm a sophomore studying IT at the community college, scraping by with a part-time job at Tech Haven, a cramped computer repair shop on Monroe Street. My life's nothing special. I wake up in my tiny rented room, a converted garage with a fold-out bed, and a desk buried under circuit boards and cables. I drive a beat-up 2005 Honda Civic, its dashboard rattling to lo-fi beats on my way to work. I don't have a big circle of friends, no girlfriend, no drama. Just me, my tools, and a knack for fixing things that don't want to be fixed. I like it that way. Machines make sense. They don't ask questions or leave you guessing. I always figured my days would keep rolling like this, predictable as the hum of my car's engine. I never thought anything would change. It was a Wednesday afternoon in late October, the kind of day where the air smells like rain that hasn't fallen yet. Tech Haven was dead quiet, just the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights and the whir of a cooling fan on the counter. I was tinkering with a cracked motherboard, half lost in thought when the glass door chimed and swung open. I didn't look up right away, expecting another college kid with a waterlogged MacBook. But then I heard her voice low and steady, like she was measuring every word. "This machine keeps freezing. Can you save it?" I glanced up. She stood there, a woman in her early 40s, holding a battered Dell laptop that looked like it had survived a war. The edges were chipped, the screen hinge wobbled, and half the keys were worn smooth. She wore a white dress shirt tucked into dark slacks, a black coat draped over one arm. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, but what caught me were her eyes, deep brown, shadowed with exhaustion, like she hadn't slept in days. She wasn't beautiful in a magazine way, but there was something about her, a quiet strength holding her together despite the cracks I could sense. Her name, I'd learned later, was Adrienne. I took the laptop, setting it on the counter. "Let me take a look," I said, flipping it open. The screen flickered, barely alive. I was about to ask the usual tech questions: when did it start, what programs were running, when she spoke again, her voice softer now, almost a confession. "It used to be my ex-husband's. I kept it, because it still has some recordings of my son when he was little." I froze, my hands hovering over the keyboard. She wasn't looking at me anymore. Her gaze was fixed on the counter, her fingers gripping the edge of her purse like it was an anchor. I could see it in the way her jaw tightened. The way her breath caught, she was fighting to keep something inside. Something heavy. I didn't know what to say. I'm not good with words, never have been. But I could feel the weight of what she'd just let slip, like she'd opened a door she hadn't meant to. "I'll do my best," I said quietly, meeting her eyes for a second. I'll really try." It sounded lame, but it was all I had. She nodded, her lips pressing into a thin line, and I caught a flicker of something in her expression. Gratitude maybe, or relief. She thanked me, her voice barely above a whisper, and turned to leave. The door chimed again as she stepped out, and I watched her silhouette disappear into the gray afternoon. I sat back down, the laptop still open in front of me. It wasn't just a machine anymore, it was a piece of someone's life, someone's pain. I ran a diagnostic. My fingers moving on autopilot, but my mind was somewhere else. I kept replaying her voice, the way it cracked when she mentioned her son. I didn't know her story, but I could feel it, the kind of loss that doesn't just fade with time. The screen blinked, showing a corrupted drive, but I knew I could probably save the files. I had to. Not just because it was my job, but because I'd seen something in her eyes that made me want to try harder than I ever had. That night, after closing the shop, I stayed late, hooking the laptop to my recovery rig. The hard drive whined, but it was still spinning. I found a folder labeled Ben, and against my better judgment, I opened one of the audio files. A kid's laugh burst through my earbuds, bright and alive, followed by a man's voice reading a bedtime story. I stopped it after a few seconds, my chest tight. I didn't know what I was getting into, but I knew I couldn't walk away, not from the laptop, not from her. I didn't promise I could save everything. But I promised myself I wouldn't give up. 3 days after Adrienne left her broken laptop at Tech Haven, I was ready to call her. I'd spent every spare hour coaxing the machine back to life, pulling files from a hard drive that groaned like it was on its last breath. I wasn't just fixing a computer. I was piecing together something fragile, something that mattered more than I could explain. My rented room smelled like burnt coffee and so did my desk a mess of cables and tools. I hadn't slept much, but I didn't care. I'd saved the audio files, every laugh, every story, and a few grainy videos buried in a folder labeled Ben. I didn't listen to them all. It felt too private, like reading someone's diary, but I knew they were there safe. I dialed Adrienne's number from the shop counter, my hands sweaty. It was late afternoon, the Spokane sky heavy with gray clouds. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Hello. Her voice was cautious, like she was bracing for bad news. It's Owen from Tech Haven, I said, clearing my throat. Your laptop's ready. I got the files. There was a pause long enough that I thought the call dropped. Then she said, soft but firm, I'll be there in 20 minutes. When she walked in, the shop felt smaller. She wore the same black coat, her hair still pulled back, but her eyes looked different, less guarded, maybe hopeful. I had the laptop open, a pair of cheap speakers plugged in. Want to see? I asked, gesturing to the screen. She nodded, stepping closer. I clicked on a file and a child's giggle filled the air, followed by a man's voice, warm and patient, reading about a bear and a honey tree. Adrienne froze, her breath catching. Then she sank into the chair across from me, her hands covering her face. She didn't sob, not exactly, but her shoulders shook, and I could see her fingers trembling. I didn't say anything. I'm no good at comforting people, never know the right words. So I just sat there, letting the audio loop until she was ready. After a minute, she lowered her hands, her eyes red but steady. Ben was 6 when he died. She said, her voice barely above a whisper. A car accident. My ex-husband. He couldn't handle it. He left a year later. I kept this laptop not because I needed it, but because I was scared if I let it go, I'd lose what's left of my son. She looked at the screen, then at me. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to, I said, and I meant it. I slid the laptop toward her, but she didn't touch it. Instead, she leaned back, wiping her cheeks. You're young, she said almost to herself. Why do you care? I shrugged, feeling my face heat up. I don't know, I saw you holding it all together that first day. I figured you deserved someone to try as hard as you do. She didn't respond right away, just studied me like she was seeing me for the first time. Then she stood, smoothing her coat. Thank you, Owen, she said, and started for the door. I don't know what came over me, but I stood too, my hand brushing her sleeve. Hey, I said, my voice quieter than I meant. If you ever need someone to fix, not just machines, but like trust or something, I'm here. It sounded dumb, like a line from a bad movie, but her eyes softened and she nodded. I'll remember that, she said, and left. The next week she came back. Not with a laptop, but with an old external hard drive, its plastic case scratched and faded. It's got some photos, she said, casual but careful. Can you check if they're still there? I took it, knowing it wasn't just about the files. She lingered while I worked, asking about my classes, my beat-up Civic, why I liked fixing things. I told her about dropping a semester last year, how I felt lost until I started repairing stuff. She listened, really listened, and shared bits of her own story nights alone, after her son's funeral days, pretending she was fine. It wasn't deep talks, not yet, just two people finding common ground in the quiet of a repair shop. When she left that day, she slipped a folded note under the drive. I opened it after she was gone. Thanks for listening. I tucked it into my pocket, my heart doing that weird skip again. I wasn't fixing her, and she wasn't fixing me. But something was happening, something I couldn't name. I looked at the hard drive, its weight heavier than it should have been. I didn't know what I was doing, but for the first time I wanted to be the guy she could count on. Adrienne's visits to Tech Haven became a quiet rhythm in my life. After the hard drive, she started showing up with more relics from her past, an ancient cassette player, a scratched-up digital camera, even an iPod so old its click wheel barely turned. I knew it wasn't just about fixing things. She didn't need a working cassette to listen to music in 2025. She was bringing pieces of herself, testing if I'd keep showing up. And I did. My days still revolved around college, my creaky Honda Civic, and late nights in my rented room. But now they had a new anchor her. I'd catch myself checking the shop's door, hoping she'd walk through. I was 20, a kid who barely knew how to cook, and she was 40, carrying a loss I couldn't imagine. But when we talked, none of that seemed to matter. One chilly November evening, she came in just before closing, her breath visible in the cold air. She held a small black iPod, its screen cloudy with scratches. Found this in a drawer, she said, setting it on the counter. I don't even know what's on it anymore. I plugged it into my laptop, the shop quiet, except for the hum of the heater. As I sifted through corrupted files, she leaned against the counter closer than usual. Don't you get tired of fixing stuff nobody uses? She asked, her voice light but curious. I glanced up, meeting her eyes. Nah, these things meant something to someone once, like the people who owned them. I wasn't trying to be deep, but her expression shifted like I'd said something she'd been waiting to hear. She looked away, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. You're different, Owen, she said softly. Most people your age don't care about old things. I shrugged, my face warm. Maybe I just like the stories they tell. We started meeting outside the shop after that. Nothing big, a coffee at Rocket Bakery downtown, a walk through Riverfront Park where the Spokane River glittered under streetlights. She'd talk about her son Ben, how he loved dinosaurs and hated broccoli. I'd tell her about my mom back in Idaho, how she sent me care packages I never asked for. It wasn't flirting, not exactly. It was realer than that, like we were peeling back layers we didn't show anyone else. But every time I drove home, my mind spun. She was 20 years older. She'd lost a child, a husband. I was just a college kid with a toolbox and a beat-up car. What was I doing? One night we sat on a bench by the park's clock tower, the air sharp with winter coming. She was quieter than usual, her hands wrapped around a paper cup. You ever think about how life just stops sometimes, she asked. I nodded, not sure where she was going. She looked at me, her eyes steady but vulnerable. After Ben died, I stopped. I kept going, work bills, breathing, but I wasn't living. I don't know if I can again. Her voice cracked and I wanted to reach for her, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "You're here now. That's not nothing." She gave a small laugh, bitter but warm. You make it sound simple. I leaned closer, my shoulder brushing hers. It's not. But I see you trying. That's enough. She turned her face inches from mine, and for a second I thought she might close the gap. But she didn't. She just held my gaze, and in that moment, the age between us, the pain, the doubts they didn't exist, it was just us. The next day, she brought a USB drive to the shop, saying it held old emails she wanted to recover. While I worked, she stayed asking about my coding classes, laughing when I admitted I'd failed a midterm once. I finished the job and handed her the drive along with a note I'd scribbled on a post-it: memories don't need to be perfect to be worth keeping. She read it, her fingers tracing the words, then slipped it into her pocket without a word. That evening, she texted me a first. Dinner tomorrow, my treat. I said yes, my heart racing. We met at a diner on Division Street, the kind with vinyl booths and neon signs. Over burgers and fries, she told me about her ex-husband, how he'd called her weak for grieving too long. He wasn't wrong, she said, staring at her plate. I don't have much left to give. I set my fork down, my voice steady. You're wrong. I don't need you to give me anything. I just want to see you be you, not the you who's fine, but the you who's real. She looked up, her eyes searching mine. I'm 20 years older than you, Owen. I'm a mess. What do you see in me? I swallowed, my throat tight. I see someone who's still here even after everything. That's more than most people can say. She didn't reply, but her hand brushed mine under the table, brief but deliberate. It wasn't a promise, but it was something. When I got home, I sat on my bed, the USB's recovered emails still on my mind. One was from her to Ben, written years ago, promising a camping trip they never took. I didn't tell her I'd read it. I didn't need to. I was already in too deep, falling for someone who thought she had nothing left to offer. But I wasn't here to fix her. I just wanted to stay. I didn't know if I could make her believe she was enough, but I was damn sure going to try. The diner on Division Street became our unspoken ritual. Adrian and I met there most weekends, splitting fries and trading stories under the hum of neon lights. I'd tell her about my coding projects, she'd share memories of Ben's obsession with stargazing. Each time I saw her soften, her guarded edges wearing down. But I also saw the fear in her eyes, the way she'd glance away when we got too close to something real. I was falling for her hard, and I knew she felt something too. But 20 years and a lifetime of loss stood between us. I didn't push. I just kept showing up, hoping she'd see I wasn't going anywhere. One rainy Saturday afternoon, my phone buzzed while I was at Tech Haven, untangling a mess of cables. It was Adrian, her voice sharp with panic. "Owen, can you come over? It's him." I didn't need to ask who, her ex-husband. My stomach twisted. "I'm on my way," I said, grabbing my keys. The shop was empty, so I locked up and sped across Spokane in my rattling Civic, the wipers barely keeping up with the downpour. Her house was on the South Hill, a modest two-story with a sagging porch. I parked rain-soaking my hoodie and knocked. No answer. I tried the handle unlocked. Inside the living room was a wreck. A lamp lay on its side cords, yanked from the wallpapers scattered across the floor. Adrienne was in the corner, curled on the couch, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her laptop, the one I'd fixed, sat unplugged on the coffee table. She looked up, her face, pale, eyes wide. "He's gone," she whispered. "He came for the laptop. Said it had his old work files. I told him no, and he—" She trailed off, her hands shaking. I knelt beside her, keeping my voice steady. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" She shook her head, but her breathing was uneven. "He didn't touch me. Just yelled. Threw things. I thought he'd take it." I glanced at the laptop, its screen dark. "He didn't," I said. "It's still here." She nodded, but her eyes were distant, like she was somewhere else. I started picking up the mess, writing the lamp-gathering papers, trying to make the room feel less broken. She watched me silent until she spoke, her voice barely audible. "I'm not as strong as I pretend to be, Owen. I'm scared you'll see this and leave." I stopped, setting a book back on the shelf. Rain drummed against the windows and thunder rumbled in the distance. I turned to her, my heart pounding. "If I was here just for the shiny parts, I'd have left the first day," I said. "I didn't stay for the hardware, Adrienne. I stayed for the software, the soft stuff, the weak stuff, the real stuff inside you." Her eyes welled up, and before I could say more, she stood and threw her arms around me, her face buried in my chest. I held her, feeling her tremble, the weight of her fear in mine, mixing in that quiet, wrecked room. She cried, not loud but deep, like something she'd held back for years. I didn't let go. When she finally pulled back, her cheeks were wet, but she managed a small smile. "You're too young to be this stubborn," she said. I laughed, brushing a tear from her face. "And you're too tough to think you're not worth it." We sat on the couch, her hand in mine, and she told me about her ex, how he'd blamed her for Ben's death, how he'd left because she grieved too much. I listened, my thumb tracing circles on her palm, knowing words wouldn't fix it. That night I stayed, not for anything dramatic, just to be there. We fell asleep on the couch, her head on my shoulder, the rain slowing outside. In the weeks that followed, I started coming over more. I'd fix her leaky faucet, she'd make us spaghetti. She taught me how to knead sourdough. I showed her how to edit photos on her phone. It wasn't a relationship, not yet, but it was something. We kept it quiet, not because we were ashamed, but because Spokane's a small town and people talk. One evening while we were washing dishes, she handed me a key, a plain silver one, its edges worn. "It's not for you to move in," she said, her voice careful. "It's just so you know you're welcome here. Always." I took it, my fingers brushing hers. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, and I meant it. She looked at me, her eyes searching, and nodded. It wasn't a promise of forever, but it was a promise of now. I kept the key in my pocket, a small weight that felt bigger than it was. Every time I drove to her place, I'd touch it, reminding myself this was real. I wasn't trying to save her, and she wasn't trying to fix me. We were just two people finding something solid in the middle of our own messes. I didn't know if I could make her believe she deserved this, but I knew I'd spend every day trying. I wasn't here for the easy parts. I was here for her. A year after that rainy night in Adrienne's wrecked living room, we stood together outside a small shop near Manito Park. The wooden sign above the door read, "Second Start," carved in simple letters. It was our place, a repair shop for old computers, cameras, anything with a memory worth saving. I'd quit Tech Haven to focus on it, and Adrienne had poured her savings into the lease. We opened in the spring when Spokane's lilacs bloomed and the air felt new. I was 21 now, still driving my rattling Civic, but my life wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours. The shop wasn't much, a narrow space with exposed brick walls, a counter cluttered with tools, and a coffee maker that hissed like it was mad at the world. But it was alive. Customers came with broken laptops, faded photos, cassette tapes they couldn't bear to lose. I fixed the tech. Adrienne handled the people, her quiet warmth making them feel safe. We worked side by side, not calling ourselves anything, not boyfriend and girlfriend, not partners. We didn't need a label. People in town saw us together, raised eyebrows, whispered guesses. We let them. We weren't hiding, but we weren't explaining either. Mornings started the same. I'd brew coffee black for me, cream for her. She'd pick a playlist Springsteen or Fleetwood Mac songs older than me. We'd laugh about my terrible taste in breakfast cold pizza always, and she'd insist on baking scones. Afternoons, we'd sit out back during slow hours, the park's trees rustling across the street. It wasn't perfect. I'd forget to pay the electric bill once. She'd get quiet some days, lost in memories of Ben. But we didn't try to fix each other. We just stayed. One evening, I was wiping down a dusty laptop screen, the shop glowing orange in the sunset. Adrienne was sorting receipts, her hair loose for once, catching the light. She looked up, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen. I used to think no one could love someone stuck in the past, she said, her voice low. I set the cloth down, leaning against the counter. Then, I guess I'm the first, I said, smiling. I love your present, your past, all of it. She didn't reply, just crossed the room and took my hand, her fingers warm against mine. It wasn't a grand moment, no fireworks or speeches. It was just us, real and enough. We never talked about marriage. We didn't need rings or vows. I still carried the key she'd given me, its weight a quiet promise, in my pocket. I'd spend nights at her place cooking terrible stir-fry while she laughed at my knife skills. She'd leave notes in my toolbox, simple things like, "Don't skip lunch," or "You're better than you think." I kept them all stuffed in a drawer at home. My college friends asked who I was seeing, why I was always busy. I'd shrug, say, "Someone who gets me." They didn't push. Nobody did. Her ex-husband never came back. I don't know if he gave up or just forgot. Adrienne didn't care anymore. She'd stopped checking her phone for threats, stopped flinching at loud knocks. She wasn't healed, not completely. Grief doesn't vanish like that, but she was here living, not just surviving. And I was too. I wasn't the lost kid who'd stumbled into her life with a screwdriver. I was someone who'd chosen to stay every day no matter what. That night we closed the shop and walked to the park, the sky streaked with pink and gold. We sat on a bench, the same one where we'd talked months ago. Her hand rested in mine, her thumb tracing slow patterns. "You didn't just fix my laptop," she said, her voice steady. "You fixed something in me." I shook my head. "I didn't fix you, I just saw you." She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, and we watched the sun dip below the trees. I didn't promise her the world. I didn't have it to give, but I promised her my days, my mornings, my stubborn heart that kept showing up. She didn't need me to erase her past, and I didn't need her to be anything but herself. We'd built something not from scratch, but from the pieces we both brought, scratched, worn, but still working. And as the park grew quiet, I knew I'd spend every day making sure it stayed that way.